Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jay Ranke. I've got 4 questions as I'm driving down the freeway here in Tennessee. I'll be in Nashville in about an hour. First question, why the videos? Second question, can I admit when my wife is right? Third question, how can I tell I'm getting older? And fourth question, when do you call the police? First question, why do the videos? I was buying coffee earlier and I realized, you know what, is this just an ego trip? I gotta have people listen to me and get my face in front of the public. You know, is that just an ego trip? That's a very real possibility, people. I do have to admit, however, that I just enjoy exploring things and sharing what I've discovered. I really enjoy that. As a pastor, I used to love it when I would find something new in the text and that would really become a really exciting thing when I was preaching. As a teacher, every day, almost every day, I would have what I called a fiver, the first 5 minutes of class, and I'd give the kids points for being part of this. I would find a museum they'd never seen before, like the Louvre in Paris, or the Hermitage, my favorite, in St. Petersburg, Russia. Or I would show them a painting or music, Aaron Copland's Appalachian Spring. We would listen to portions of it each day, just so they could see things they'd never seen before, or a famous painting, or even sometimes the opening sequence of the Monkees TV show. They'd never seen that before. It's just fun to find stuff and to share it. So hopefully that's what's going on with these videos. But I do have to ask sometimes if there's more ego going on than what a person would like to admit. Second, when I can admit my wife is right. Very often when I drive, I don't listen to the radio, so I watch or listen to a lot of YouTube videos. Well, when you listening to YouTube videos, that takes a lot of data. And before this trip, my wife said, "Dear, why don't you download some stuff on podcasts and listen to that?" And so I've been doing that. And you know what? My wife was right. I've enjoyed listening to Jordan Peterson and to Ben Shapiro and to some creation evolution stuff and to some music. Ed Sheeran, Coldplay, Maroon 5. Man, they've got some great music. So I'm really enjoying the podcasts. Third thing, how can I tell I'm getting older? Well, I did get pulled over for speeding in South Dakota. The highway patrol only gave me a warning. But typically, I'm not the slowest person driving, but I'm noticing something, people. I'm getting passed by a lot more people than I used to. And I'm thinking, I think I'm getting older. And fourth question, when do you call the police? I had a situation the other night at a motel in Kansas that kind of shook me up. I checked into my room, and the hotel was not all that full. It was a nice, clean room. But the adjoining room next to me, there was a door between me and the next room. Of course, the door wasn't open. We had 2 different rooms. But I could hear everything on the guy's TV. And I went to the desk and I said, "Hey, I don't want to bother the guy, but any chance that I could get a different room?" Because the hotel wasn't that full. And then they said, "Well, you know, last night we were really full. The whole entire second floor was full, but we didn't get any of those rooms cleaned today. So no, we don't have another room." I said, "Okay." Well, about 9 o'clock, I go next door and I knock on the door. He doesn't answer. I knock a second time. He doesn't answer. I knock a third time, and he comes to the door and I said, "Hey, look, any chance you could just turn your TV down a little? I can hear everything." And he said, "What's your problem? This isn't loud." And I said, "Hey, look, I'm just telling you, it's loud. I can hear everything." And he said, "What's your problem? It's not loud. There's no problem here." And I said, "I can hear everything that's going on." Well, he closes the door, and 11 o'clock, I can still hear his TV, and I'm getting ready for bed, and I'm getting a little frustrated. This time, I went back to his door, and this time I knocked a little more rapidly, a little more firmly, and he came to the door, and he said, "What's your problem? Who are you?" And I said, "Look, it's just, I can hear everything." And he said, and he shoves me across the hall. And I said, "Wait a minute, I'm just asking you to turn your TV down." And then he grabs my throat and he shoves me by my throat. I'm not joking here, people. And I said, wait, guy, I'm just asking you to turn your TV down." And he gets in my face and he says, "If you keep this up, I will take you down." He said, "Who are you? Who do you think you are?" And I said, "Look, I'm just telling you the TV is too loud." He said, "Let's go to the front desk." And so we go to the front desk. And I try to explain to the people, I'm just asking him to turn the TV down. And he said, "Who do you think you are?" And I said, "I'm your neighbor." And he says, "What's your problem?" He said, "You must have been dropped when you were in the nursery." And I said, "Look, guy, I'm just asking to turn the TV down." And so he finally goes back to his room, and I thought, wait a minute, the guy had his hand on my throat. Should I call the police? So I called the police. And it turns out a sheriff's deputy comes, and then a police officer shows up. And I said, look, I don't want to be a crybaby, but the guy shoved me and had his hand on my throat. And he said, no, that's not right. And so turned out, I said, if I pursue this, what will happen? And he said, you'll probably have to come back for court in about a month. And I said, look, I'm from North Dakota. I don't want to come back to Kansas for court. And so he said, well, we'll go talk to the guy. I said, thank you. So I didn't pursue it. And then the desk says, hey, would you like a different room? Would you feel safer in a different room? And I said, yes, I would. And they said, we've got a room upstairs. So the motel had a room upstairs they could put me in. And that's where I spent that night. That's the news from here in Tennessee. Hope you're all doing well. Take care, goodbye, and God bless.